Welcome to the Battlegrounds Tour Agency's tour of Erangle. Now, the island itself is pretty infamous, but on this tour you're going to get up close and personal with Erangle and see the major landmarks from the ground, just like a real Battlegrounds contestant. Only difference is, all of you get to leave the island alive. While we're down here, we'll also dive into some of the history of the island. Nobody really knows the whole story about what went down here, but with the help of prominent Battlegrounds historians, we've pieced together some of the clues left behind. Now, when people still lived here, there was quite the little community on the island. Farmers, laborers, physicians, teachers, even dock workers made up Erangle's economy, and everyone contributed to keep the island a self-sustained place. Even after the military took control of Sosnovka, life kept on like normal for a time. But as the occupying force got more oppressive and more demanding of the population's obedience, well, things started to escalate. Resistance against the military started to rise up, which caused the military to tighten their grip, and so on. Of course, that all ended in 1965 when the bombs started dropping. Anyway, our first stop on the tour is Kameshki. It might look like a sleepy seaside town, but Kameshki was actually quite important to the resistance, as is apparent by their hidden in plain sight base. This was one of several bases set up around the island to monitor what the military was doing and plan strikes against them. And being so close to Stalber, you can bet they were relaying communications of their own. Speaking of, let's head up the mountain. Stalber is one of the highest points on Erangle, and as such was the perfect spot to set up communications arrays. While we don't know for sure which side of the conflict controlled Stalber, the resistance base in Kameshki and the bunker just down the hill tell us that this area was mostly blue territory. They even flew the flags of their enemy down here to help throw them off their trail. This here is Erangle's infamous crash site. It's nothing compared to that aircraft graveyard down on Sosnovka, but it being so out of place is exactly what makes it interesting. Nobody's quite clear on how the plane went down, but these things don't really have a habit of just falling out of the sky by themselves. And that was before flight data recorders were widely used, so we might never know what took her down. But she's part of the island now, and part of the tour. George Bull was a priority for the occupying force, as it housed a large portion of Erangle's population, and was the island's most prominent port, with shipping containers full of supplies from the mainland arriving every week. They set up base in the north of the city and put its jail to good use once the blue flags started flying around. Some of you noticed the cameras around. Those are a more recent addition to make sure none of the Battlegrounds action is missed. They get replaced pretty often with all the bullets flying around. Speaking of surveillance and bullets flying, that mountain outside of Gatka was a prime place to set up surveillance, or even a sniper nest. It's a pretty safe bet that the resistance was up there keeping an eye on the Red Eye. That's it for the first leg of our tour. We'll spend the night here in Gatka and start up first thing in the morning. Just remember, the crew does a great job of cleaning up after a battleground, but if you happen to come across a weapon, just assume it's loaded and alert one of your guides immediately. Last thing we need is to cut the tour short to rush someone back for medical attention. The rest of the night is yours. If you're enjoying the tour, be sure to give us a 5-star review and tell your friends that it was the Battlegrounds Tour Agency that helped you explore the Battlegrounds like never before. Good night, enthusiasts. I hope everyone had a good rest without having to keep one eye open like a real contestant would. To recap, yesterday we visited the northern parts of Erangle, starting from Kameshki and ending up in Gatka. Today we're trekking back across the island to the eastern shores. So pile back into our authentic Battlegrounds Tour Agency UAZ and let's get moving. Our first stop today is simply known as the Ruins, and is one of Erangle's most historic landmarks. What you're seeing is actually the remaining foundation of a giant castle that predates most other structures on the island. Unfortunately, with resistance bunkers lining its border, it was always at risk of attack, as we could see from the occupation's tanks still lying around. Following the road to the east, we find Rozhok, which is pretty much smack dab in the middle of the core island. Economically speaking, Rozhok was a nice central hub, as many of the island's major roadways joined up here to make use of its bridges across the river. Now strategically, if you're looking to keep an eye on enemy movements, the outlooks around the well-traveled city provide pretty reliable information. For people just trying to live their lives, Rozhok was quiet enough, and nearby the island's school as well. Rumor has it that the Battlegrounds administrator himself attended that school, before the conflict around here got too bad. Old Yasnia here was a strange marriage of rural and residential. It's one of the biggest cities on the island, even though it's surrounded by farmland on every border. There were good, hard-working, and humble people here, which probably made it all the more jarring when the military moved in and took over.
Humble beginnings or not, it didn't take long for those hayfields to become mortar fields when the conflict escalated. A little southeast of Yasnia, there's an out-of-place structure for what we know about the island. Erangle was known for having a relatively meek and humble population, so whoever built this mansion compound either had some political power or ran one of the island's commercial ventures. Historians believe that the hole blown in the side was from a resistance attack, judging by the photos found in some of the bunkers. Now, for the most part, the battlegrounds are kept as close to natural as possible. What we're about to see is one of the few cases of post-battleground construction on any of the fields. This building here is special to the island. Original construction was abandoned at some point before the bombs, but after Erangle became a battleground, it was decided that this building would serve as sort of a museum, commemorating the item's past as well as some of the key influential organizations in Battleground's history. Construction is still underway, but will be completed soon, so make sure to take our tour again on your next trip. We've seen military bunkers and outposts all over the island so far, but this one has historians a little baffled. The hillside artillery here would have made a pretty good defensive point for any enemy aircraft coming in from the southern coast of the island, but that direction would have been the allies of the military as well. This spot is a little close to Sosnovka for us to assume the resistance controlled it. Regardless, it makes for an interesting stop on our tour and always gets our guests thinking up their own theories. Historic Erangle wasn't really known for rampant crime, but the military sure made use of the island's prisons while trying to keep control over the population. The largest of which is coming up here. Prisoners were kept locked up during the night and put to work during the day. Now, normal citizens weren't treated much better, but at least they had a home to go back to once the work was done. That was quite a long day, and we certainly don't want to overwhelm you, so we're going to stop and rest for the night here. Tomorrow, we finish up our tour with some of the major remaining areas of the island. The good news is, each of you gets to spend the night in one of Erangle's historic prison cells. This type of experience can only be had with the Battlegrounds tour agency. So remember to leave that 5-star review and tell your friends and family all about how you got to experience the Battlegrounds like never before. Sleep well, inmates.